नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि, धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, संघं शरणं गच्छामि। द्वितीयंपि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि, द्वितीयंपि संघं शरणं गच्छामि, तृतीयंपि बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि। पानातिपाता वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। अदिन्नदाना वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। कामेषु मिच्छाचारा वेरमणि सिक्खापदं समादियामि। सर्वपापस्सकरणं कुशलस्य उपसम्पदा सचित्तपर्योदपनं एतं बुद्धानुशासनं। साधु साधु।
आजच्या लेक्चरचा टॉपिक आहे अंडरस्टँडिंग माइंड. लहानपणी आपल्याला माइंडबद्दल आपली काय धारणा होती आणि धम्म अभ्यास करताना आता काय बदल झाला ते थोडक्यात मी सांगते. खूप लहानपणी कोणीतरी म्हटलं, अरे इस लड़की का दिमाग बहुत तेज है. मला खूप बरं वाटलं. पण टीनेजमध्ये येता येता 8वी 9वीत केमिस्ट्री टीचरनी मला म्हटलं, अरे दिमाग में भूसा भरा है क्या, गोबर भरा है, कुछ भी केमिस्ट्री समझ में नहीं आता. तेव्हा माझं मलाच माहीत की ते गोबर काढून परत केमिस्ट्री घुसवणं किती कठीण होतं. ॲडल्टहूडपर्यंत येता येता समजलं दिल की दिमाग पे चलती नहीं. मग नंतर हे पण समजलं जेव्हा मुलं झाली, मुलं शाळेतून परत आल्यावर, मम्मा आज टीचरने तो दिमाग का दही कर डाला. म्हणजे काय, आपल्याला किती गलत म्हणजे चुकीचं माहिती होतं आपल्या डोक्याबद्दल. कोणी म्हणालं इसका दिमाग 7वें आसमान पे रहता है, कोणी बोललं ऊपर का माला खाली है, दिमाग बहुत चाटती है, दिमाग बहुत चाटता है. म्हणजे काय, आपण का असे शब्द घेऊन मोठे झालो? कारण आपल्याला मेंदू, डोकं, दिमाग, माइंड याबद्दल तेवढीच माहिती आहे जेवढी आपल्या सर्कलमध्ये सगळ्यांना माहिती असतं. कोणी म्हणालं इसका दिमाग घुटने में है, कोणी म्हणालं इसका दिमाग कंप्यूटर से तेज है. असे अनेक ना कितीतरी प्रकार आपण डोक्याबद्दल ऐकले आहेत. आपले प्रेसिडेंट डॉक्टर संजय रामटेके सर, ही इज अ न्यूरोलॉजिस्ट. ही नोज द फंक्शन्स ऑफ ब्रेन, बट व्हॉट इज माइंड? हा लहान असतो, मोठा असतो, काळा असतो, गोरा असतो, इथे असतो कि आणखीन कुठे असतो, घुटने में रहता है, कहाँ रहता है? हमने किसी ने देखा है क्या माइंड को? फिर भी वी आर ह्यूमन बीइंग्स एंड वी हैव मेंटल एबिलिटीज. तर वी आर सो एक्साइटेड टू नो अबाउट अवर माइंड फ्रॉम अवर गेस्ट स्पीकर मंगेश दहिवलेजी. हे आपल्याला धम्माच्या दृष्टिकोनातून बुद्ध काय म्हणाले माइंडबद्दल. So he is going to enlighten us with his lecture on understanding our mind. So dear audience, I present to you Mangesh Dahiwaleji, who needs no introduction, and he is a prolific reader and a great orator.
So first of all, I am very delighted today to be talking on this fourth session. And I reckon that this session is going to be a little bit heavy lifting for, it was a heavy lifting for me, and I think that it will be very heavy lifting for you as well, because we are going to talk about something very important, but at the same time something very complex. तर आपल्याकडे जो अप्रोच असेल तो दोन प्रकारे आपण अप्रोच करू विषयाला. वन इज फ्रॉम द सायंटिफिक पॉइंट ऑफ व्ह्यू. तर आपण हा जो विषय आहे, हा जो टॉपिक आहे, वी आर गोइंग टू अप्रोच दिस टॉपिक from two perspectives. One is scientific perspective and another one is a Buddhist perspective. Okay, and I'm going to show you that these two perspectives are not different. They converge on a single point. That I'm going to show you how it converges. So whenever we think about mind, now the neuroscientists, neurobiologists all have mapped the mind into our brain, except one thing. Whenever we feel anger, what happens in our brain? Whenever we feel compassionate, what happens in our brain? Whenever we are angry, what happens in our brain? Everything is mapped in the brain. Now, brain is a very complex organ, as I have been, talking from last 3 sessions. And if you want to know more about its complexities, you go to the neurologist, Dr. Sanjay Rahamtike. Okay? So what I'm going to talk to you, bring you some insights from what is happening in the scientific domain today. So everything, as I said, whenever we talk about different mental states like anger, hatred, love, compassion, gratitude, how that has got an impact on our brain, we can clearly show it. Only one thing is missing. That's a hard problem in the science, is how this physical brain is linked with the mind. We are not able to map what are the thoughts. We are not able to see where, what are the, we can see what is happening physically in the mind, but we cannot point out, the anger or, compassion or whatever. Now come to certain conclusions. One of them is very interesting, that our brain is a very open system. So whatever we call mind is a combination of brain, the environment that we perceive, and also consciousness. It's not very simple. It's not just a kind of a device. It's always working. Even when our 5 sensory organs are closed, even if you close your nose or you close your eyes, you close your ears, the brain is still functioning. And you imagine 80 billion, म्हणजे आता जगाच्या ह्याच्यावर किती, म्हणजे 8 बिलियन लोक जगात आहेत. किती बिलियन लोक आहेत? पूर्ण पृथ्वीच्या पाठीवर 8 बिलियन. आणि आपल्या डोक्यामध्ये जे न्यूरॉन्स आहेत ब्रेनमध्ये ते 80 बिलियन आहेत. You can imagine and their permutations and combinations. So you can imagine that there is no complex entity than the brain. They say it's more complex than the universe itself, if you look at the permutations and the combinations of it. So what happens, our brain has been studied from different perspectives, and they have found that it's an open system which is always working. And one of the interesting thing that they found about brain, which is very important, is it has evolved over the period of billions of years. From the first life to the complex human consciousness, human brain. It's a very complex device. So let me go straight into that. So if you look at the brain, and if you look at the different parts of the brain, like particularly if you look at the left brain, our brain has 2 halves. दोन डिव्हिजन मध्ये आपला ब्रेन डिवाइड आहे. आणि त्याला एक कोलोझम नावाचा असतो, कॉर्पस कोलोझम, ते त्याला 2 ब्रेनना जोडते, राईट ब्रेन आणि लेफ्ट ब्रेन. Now you don't have to go into complexities of that. I'm going to look at it from the Buddhist point of view, so you will understand what I'm getting at. So the left brain is all about language. It's all about discerning the patterns, and the language is a pattern. लक्षात ठेवा एक गोष्ट, लँग्वेज एक पॅटर्न आहे अँड दॅट पॅटर्न इज कॉमन इन एंटायर ह्युमन ब्रेन. It's called the innate grammar, the innate syntax. That's why we can learn any language in the world. Any language in the world. Because there is an innate, module in the mind that lets us, speak any language. So left brain is all about language, and there was a study where, some, patients have epilepsy. So they split the brain. They cut the part joining the two brain, two halves of the brain. It's one brain only, but, two halves. तर लेफ्ट ब्रेनमध्ये काय होतं माहिती आहे का, आपण लँग्वेज आणि पॅटर्न्स डिसन करतो. आता ही जी लँग्वेज आहे आणि रियालिटी आहे इट्स कम्प्लिटली डिफरंट. बट द लँग्वेज इज हेल्पफुल. आता मी म्हटलं की तुम्ही चेअरवर बसलेले आहात. नाऊ द चेअर वर्ड इज अ पर्टिक्युलर साऊंड विच डेजिग्नेट अ पर्टिक्युलर थिंग, राईट? बट इफ यू वॉन्ट टू टॉक इन चायनीज विल से इजर मीन्स चेअर, किंवा आपण मराठीत म्हणू खुर्ची. The वेगवेगळे sound are, but they are pointing to certain object, and we think that whatever labels there are as true as the object that we are witnessing. थोडं कॉम्प्लेक्स आपण लक्षात घ्या. So the language entraps us completely, totally, and that's the part of the left brain. Now right brain is not about language. The right brain is not about language. The right brain is very different. It's even prelingual, or before the language comes into being. There are a lot of experiments conducted today and ascertained by the lot of scientists that the right brain doesn't need the language. म्हणजे आपला जो राईट पार्ट ऑफ द ब्रेन आहे त्याला लँग्वेजची गरज नाही. इट्स व्हेरी इंट्युटिव्ह. आणि जे काही ज्या गोष्टी असतात, म्हणजे लोकांनी, म्हणजे न्यूरो सायंटिस्टनी हे लॅबोरेटरीमध्ये टेस्ट केलेलं आहे की वेन यू फील कंपॅशनेट, इट हॅज गॉट अन इम्पॅक्ट विच वी कॅन नॉट इमॅजिन टू दी हेल्थ ऑफ द ब्रेन. Then the second characteristics that they found which impacts our brain very positively, which is beyond language, because the language mediates, it's a social creation. Language is a social creation. It is not something which is there. It's a social phenomena. That's why we speak a particular language. So they found another interesting value, interesting quality that if we pursue, it can have a very positive impact on our brain, and by that way, on our mind and our body, that is gratitude. आता बुद्धाने दोन गुणधर्म सांगितले, दोन गोष्टी सांगितल्या ज्याचं आपण पालन केलं तर आपण खूप हेल्दी जीवन पद्धती जगतो. एक आहे करुणा. आणि करुणामध्ये काय होतं बघा, ब्रेनमध्ये काय होतं, दिस पार्ट ऑफ द ब्रेन मिरर्स द अदर पर्सन. सो वेन एव्हर यू थिंक अबाउट अदर पर्सन ॲज यू थिंक अबाउट युअर सेल्फ. इट्स कॉल्ड थिअरी ऑफ माइंड ॲज वेल. म्हणजे सायकोलॉजीमध्ये आला म्हणतात थिअरी ऑफ माइंड, बिकॉज वी हॅव द थिअरी ऑफ माइंड इन अवर ब्रेन. दॅट्स वाय वी कॅन थिंक अबाउट अदर पर्सन. हे रागात आहेत, हे आता थोडं आनंदी आहेत, हे दुःखात आहेत. हाऊ वी परसीव दॅट? बिकॉज वी हॅव अ थिअरी ऑफ माइंड. अँड वेन वी मिरर अदर पर्सन just like we will think about ourselves, that is the basis of compassion, metta. Something radical happens. The neuroscience says that something radical happens in our brain. It becomes more positive, it becomes more quiet. I'm going to come to that. I'm going to tell you a lot of interesting stuff that is coming from science and how that correlate to Buddhism. The second characteristic is kritanyata. Whenever you feel the sense of gratitude for having got what you got, since we are born, we are always at the mercy of other person. Always. लहानपणापासून आपण पैदा जन्मतो तेव्हापासून our brain is developed, but it is not yet conditioned to learn language, even walk. We are the only species whose infant needs a lot of care, upbringing. We are the only species. The hardware is there, but the software has to be imparted, right? So these two characteristics, and they have studied in the laboratories. There are now a lot of different machines available. MRIs and fMRIs and so on and so forth. You can exactly know what is happening in your brain. So I told you, left is all about language, creating, looking at the world through the mediation of the language, and the right brain is very magical in itself, right? So when you are compassionate, when you are full of gratitude, when you mirror the other person, inside you, something magical happens. Something extraordinary happens. So remember two things that the Buddha has taught us. And attested by the modern science, so particularly neuroscience, the two qualities that we need to always cultivate is to be compassionate. Always, when you think about others, you look at them just like you look at yourself. And feel tremendous amount of gratitude. Gratitude is very important. Without the other people, without our parents, without our teacher, without our friends, we cannot simply live. That is the basic fact of life. Right? So, now when we are talking about the brain, which is, I told you, very complex, and as I am speaking and you are listening, so many things are happening in your brain. So many things are happening. You know, if you look at it in terms of the waves, I'm not going to make it very complex. You know, everything is vibrating. Everything is vibrating, and there are experiments, very simple experiment, which shows that how you are even, you know, the eye consciousness is vibrating all the time. Though I see everything as a solid, but in reality it's not solid. The reality is, you know, created by my brain. This is very amazing. They say that, you know, before our senses comes into contact with the world, the brain itself has, you know, chosen what to see. The brain itself has chosen how to listen. And this is very magical. The brain, as we think, you know, it's not just about the sensory world. It's very complex. There is a deep brain that, you know, we can talk about. And the Buddha has talked about the deep consciousness. So coming back to the brain, because why I'm coming to that? Because that connects with the topic of today. We have to take two approaches whenever we study anything. One is scientific, which is third person's approach. So it has to be validated by everybody. And then there is another approach called the first person. Now, whenever we look at the mind through the scientific way, we can call it, you know, neurology or whatever. But when you are looking at the brain or mind from your first person experience, then that is called phenomenology. Because when you feel angry, you know you are feeling angry, right? I don't know whether you are feeling angry, but you know yourself what you are feeling inside. Right? So if the scientists study it in the lab, that how it feels to be angry, that's a third person point of view. And the third person point of view is a scientific point of view. So two things that we have to bear in mind. One is the neuroscience behind our brain. That is the third person, you know, which can be studied in the laboratory. And then there is another aspect to our experience, is the experience that we feel ourselves, first person. That is called phenomenology. I don't want to go into technology of that, you know, terminology of that, but you can experience certain things yourself. When you are angry, you know you are angry, right? When you feel happy, you know you are happy. You know, you don't need any instrument to measure whether you are happy or not, right? So there was a scientist, a Buddhist scientist, Mr. Varela, Dr. Varela. He connected these two fields of neuroscience and phenomenology, and he developed a very entirely new branch, which he called neurophenomenology. Very interesting branch, where they have been, you know, bringing a lot of Buddhist practitioners in the laboratory. They are, you know, asking them to go into depth of meditation, and, you know, they are just mapping their brain waves. Now the mind, the brain itself has, you know, they say why, you know, the human consciousness is as it irreplaceable by the artificial consciousness. Because our device consumes very less electricity. आता आपल्याला असं हात हलवायचा आहे आणि एखाद्या मशीनला आपण असं हात हलवायला लागलं तर द वे दॅट machine is going to consume energy. Our hand, our brain, though it's very complex, it's not consuming much energy compared to, you know, the machines and all. It is not. And what is happening? As I told you, the different neurons fire. And they say that the neurons which fire together wire together. So if you are doing same thing again and again in your life, that becomes your habit. That becomes your habitual, you know, mental state. Then that habits become so ingrained in us that even when we are not aware, you know, they become the part of our behavior. So, you know, look at the brain. I'm talking about the brain. You know, it has got this more than 80 billions of neurons. They are firing all the time. Some of the neurons fire together. They form what is called the, you know, mini columns, and then, you know, macro columns, and, you know, the total modules. So the point I'm trying to make it here is, you know, the Buddha has given a great example of what is human consciousness. It's like a roaring river. The depth of our consciousness is like a roaring river which has got the imprints of the millions of years. So your brain is not ordinary. None of us is ordinary. The fact that we have a body, the fact that we have a brain, each one of us is a product of the millions of years of evolution. Everybody is special. Everybody is unique. That's what the Buddha said. We are not common. Though we, because of the social conditioning, cultural conditioning, we are taught that, we are lower or higher, whatever. No human being is, inferior or superior. Each one of us is very special. Imagine billions of years of process. The gradual change which has occurred in the deep time has created this complex brain, complex body. You cannot underestimate. You can never feel low about yourself. We are all very special. So coming back to this very interesting fact about brain is, there are waves taking place all the time. Sometimes, like if you look at the ocean, the example of the ocean is very beautiful. So in the ocean, the water is never still. It's always moving. The brain is always moving. It can never be stationary. It's not possible. And then there are waves. And the scientists can, calculate the totality of the waves. Some total of everything happening in your brain. And they have come up with very interesting facts. They have come up with very interesting facts that we can ascertain scientifically. We can look at them in the laboratory. So, if you look at the brain, it has the different layers. Now, it's very difficult to separate one layer from another layer. It's just like an electromagnetic spectrum. Though we see the very, small part of it, we don't see infrared or, X-rays, but, it's a part of a spectrum. Just like that, our brain can be considered as, having different mental states. So some of the things that have puzzled the, modern science is like we have a waking state. So waking state is all about sensory, right? When our five senses are, attuned with the objects in the world, that's a sensory consciousness. But sensory consciousness is not just is not the entire consciousness. So there is a sleeping consciousness. Whenever we sleep, our consciousness never sleeps. Our brain never sleeps. Our brain is at no point quiescent. And even if we are active and even if we are sleeping, the brain is consuming the same amount of energy. Same. And the scientist says that the brain does a lot of inner chatter. Always the brain is, the different parts of the brain are always communicating. They are communicating so much that, the part of our energy, which is going into perceiving the world is not much. We think that, because our eyes are open, our ears are open, we are consuming a lot of, and it's not so. The brain itself is self-organizing the information. Sometimes it does without the sensory input. This brain is very magical. And the consciousness is very magical. So you have the waking consciousness, right? So whenever I'm looking at something, I'm hearing something, I'm tasting something, that's sensory consciousness. Now, on other level, there is a consciousness, like when you sleep, you are still conscious. Now, the scientists have determined a state when you are about to fall asleep. Now, you can do it. We all can experience that. So from, wakeful state to totally, a sleepy state, there is in between consciousness. Right? And of course, there is a very deep consciousness. And the Buddhists, throughout the history, has gone into the models of mind. They wanted to map the mind. What is the map of the mind? What is the structure of the mind? Why we feel angry? Why we feel happy? How we can come out of these mental states. Because the mental states, even to classify the mental state, it's not an easy job. To know, to understand how the mind functions. And the Buddha has shown how the mind functions. And he has talked about the various states of consciousness. And freedom from the oppressive mental states. How we can cultivate the, positive mental state. A very simple formula. I don't want to go into that. But if you remember these three things, let be, let go, let in. That's entire Buddhism. Let be means just observe what's happening. Right? Just be witness to what is happening. let go. Don't get attached. And let in whatever positive there is. Right? So if you want to know something about Buddhism, these three words are enough. And they accord with, how our brain functions. I have got something in writing here, which is very interesting, which is so interesting. So there was one scientist, a neuroscientist, who wanted to know how the three-dimensional world come into being. आपण जे तीन याच्यामध्ये बघतो ना जग, आपण जेव्हा जगाकडे बघतो तेव्हा 3 डायमेन्शन असतात. पण तुम्हाला माहिती आहे आपलं जे इमेज पडती ती आपली रेटिनावर जी इमेज पडते आपल्या मागे ती कशी असती? इन्व्हर्टेड इमेज असते. राईट? सो दिस इज अ व्हेरी इंटरेस्टिंग एक्सपेरिमेंट. He wanted to know how this space in 3 dimensions comes into being. And then he found something very useful. What he found, we have 2 worlds. One is, थोडं कठीण आहे पण तुम्ही लक्षात ठेवा, this is going to yield a lot of things for you if you pay attention. Okay? So the first world that he experienced was called the peripersonal. Peripersonal space. Peripersonal म्हणजे आपली जी पर्सनॅलिटी आहे त्याच्या आजूबाजूची. आता just for the sake of example, what you do, you just look at your body from your feet to your wherever you can. Just do it. Actually, it is suggested by the scientists only. You look at your body from your feet down to your whatever perceivable parts there are. Just look at it for some time. Do it. I'm telling you, this is going to yield you so much. Don't reflect. Just experience with your eyes, your body. Just do it. No, don't look at me. Look at your body. Look at what is called the peripersonal space. It's a very interesting experiment, and it accords with the Buddha's teachings to a T. Then you look up. That space is called the extrapersonal space. Now I'm going to come to the neuroscience of it. It's very interesting. It's so brilliant an experiment that if you understand this, we understand a lot of things. So whenever we are looking at ourselves, whenever we are aware about us, sensory consciousness and the emotion, then they say that our brain releases a particular set of neurotransmitters. And they have called that neurotransmitters here and now neurotransmitters. लक्षात घ्या, आपण नेहमी म्हणतो ना here and now. Right? So when you are talking about your peripersonal space, that space is in your control. You can control that space. But when you are talking about extrapersonal space, suppose if I have to go and get that chair. So when I think that I have to go and get that chair, I have to walk from here to there. That means I have to plan. And the planning is always about future. And your peripheral awareness is about here and now. And if you remember, the Buddha has taught us to be aware of our body. Cultivate this, what is called the peripersonal space, the awareness of the peripersonal space. Now I'm going to come to that. So the scientists have discovered that whenever we are planning or thinking about the future events, a particular neurotransmitter is produced. That is called dopamine. Dr. Saab will be able to tell you a lot about it. It's about planning, it's about goals, it's about future. So if something is not in our control, what happens? जर गोष्टी आपल्या कंट्रोलमध्ये नसल्या तर काय होते? What do you think? If you can control something, what happens? If you cannot control something, what happens? You become very anxious. You become very agitated. Right? And this dopamine was very important. It's in all the organisms, fish, but it's not in that quantity that we have got. And it's called the molecule of more. It always wants more. Always is trying to get something. And if it loses interest, we were talking about the love the other day. Imagine when there is a dopamine-driven love. They say, 18 months or something. You are so happy, so much in love with somebody. And when it becomes familiar, you lose interest. Right? It's all neuroscience. You can explain everything now on the basis of neuroscience. And you can couple the Buddhist insights with that. You begin to see that, there is so much that we can learn about our minds today. So coming to this very important point is, there are 2 types of, neurotransmitter. One is one set of neurotransmitter is called the here and now. So whenever you are aware of your body, whenever you are aware of your space around you, if you are aware of your emotions, if you are aware of your senses, it's automatically relaxing. That's why, we don't have to go into extremity of that, but sometimes they call it happiness neurotransmitter. In fact, I'm going to list out this. Very interesting. That's why even if it is complex, you just pay little attention. You will gain a lot out of this. So you see, there is what is called the serotonin. I will be able to tell you more. Oxytocin, endorphins. It's a form of a morphine. तुम्हाला माहिती आहे मॉर्फिन आपको जेव्हा आपल्याला खूप दुःख असते तेव्हा ते आपल्याला मॉर्फिन देतात टू deal with that. But in our brain itself, a form of anesthesia is released. Then there is another, is called endocannabinoids. आणि याच्या कॅटेगरीमध्ये एक खूप सुंदर असं त्यांनी डिस्कोर केलेलं आहे न्यूरोट्रान्समिटर. त्याचं नाव आहे आनंदामाइड. म्हणजे एक न्यूरोट्रान्समिटर आहे आपल्याकडे, आपल्या बॉडीमध्ये तयार होतो, त्याला म्हणतात आनंदामाइड. आनंद तुम्हाला माहिती आहे शब्द, त्याचं नावच ठेवलं त्यांनी आनंदामाइड. त्याचा जॉय, ब्लीस अँड डिलाइट वॉट एव्हर. सो इट्स ऑल अबाउट दिस हिअर अँड नाऊ अवेअरनेस or the peripheral awareness, personal awareness is so critical to be here and now. So the Buddha has always taught us to be here and now. If you want to be here and now, you always cultivate the awareness of body. You understand? And it has got the neuroscientific basis too. That doesn't mean that we leave the dopamine behind, because the dopamine has caused whatever cultures we have. But if we strive for more and more without knowing, it creates a lot of stress. So the future always creates stress for us. Right? And I told you, the Buddha has asked us to cultivate the awareness of your body here and now, of your mind here and now. This is very significant, very important. So, this was just out of my, I thought this is going to help us to understand the mind as the Buddha has, conceptualized. The Buddha has mapped the entire human consciousness. And I told you that the human consciousness is a spectrum. It's not, this bit is different, that bit is, we don't know, what separates one structure, one, mode from another, but, it's a complete spectrum. And in the traditional Buddhist terminologies, our consciousness is, categorized as cores, like, very solid consciousness that, I witness the world. But then there is, very sublime level of the consciousness. And further down, very, very subtle level of the consciousness. So our consciousness can, have this whole range that we can experience, if we practice in a particular way. If we deliberately practice in a particular way. I told you, mindfulness is natural. As you are listening to me, as you are seeing the world, you are mindful. But that's very rudimentary. We have to deliberately cultivate the mindfulness. We have to deliberately cultivate compassion. And in Buddhism, there is a word which has, come up, which is called prayog. Even if you don't believe it, you experiment. You try to, do as the Buddha says. Don't accept. Just do as the Buddha says and you experience for yourself what is happening. So, I think this is very interesting that, we have seen. And just, let me go through the different layers of the mind as we have been talking in the previous lectures. The sensory world. So I told you, the Buddha has talked about the 5 sensory consciousness, and we know it's very known to all of us, right? Our eyes see the world, we listen from our ears, we taste with our tongue. Most of the things is concentrated here. And one of the persons has a great awakening. He says that I can see my body, but I can never see my head. But you just think about your head, the entire world is there. Your seeing, your hearing, your tasting, your smelling, everything is here. But we cannot see. So what is there about this? It's a great Jane Cohen as well. What is there above my neck that I cannot see but can experience everything? Okay. So coming back to the the Buddhist way of understanding the structures of consciousness, the layers of consciousness. The Buddha has talked about generally our mind is like the 5 senses, right? Our waking consciousness, and then there is a thinking consciousness. Very interesting. And because of the thinking consciousness, lot of things are possible. Even the enlightenment is possible because of this thinking consciousness. So what is the thinking consciousness? So whenever, this data is brought from our five senses, our thinking consciousness, thinks into that this is chair, this is this is that, abstraction. But this six consciousness, the five sensory consciousness and, the mind, the thinking mind, and I told you the mind is very complex in Buddhism. It's very deep mind is there. And, so the Buddhists thought that even if when these six consciousnesses are shut, even then we are aware. So how is it possible? And we are aware of another thing all the time is that I exist, awareness of self. There is always awareness of self. So these things the Buddha found in his experiences that, however hard he tries to find out in his own consciousness, there is no self, but there is always a semblance of a self, that I am there, I exist. Self, me. So this is aham bhav, mamam bhav. आपण तो बघितला फॉर्म्युला. हे माझे आहे, हे मी आहे, हे माझे हा माझा आत्मा आहे. But then, and the neuroscience has mapped all, so-called mental states, but they have not yet mapped where is this self. So, the Jain Buddhist has a very important terminology, thinking without a thinker. And the Buddha said, seeing without a seer. There is only seeing, there is no seer. There is only hearing, there is no hearer. And I told you, if we understand these simple facts of our consciousness, we go long way. If we understand very deeply, the various mental states of our mind, which we can. That's what the Buddha said, that we can all experience. And, there is a path to, understand, to, experience the deeper level of our consciousness. How the whole world comes into being. The Buddha said, within this fathom-long body, we can experience the entire coming of the world and entire, devolution of the world in the same body. So, the Buddhists, examine the mind very deeply. They are called the, in Tibet they call it inner science, right? Because as the astronauts go out in the space, this science, takes you very deep into different layers of your consciousness. And we all can go in the deeper layers of our consciousness. So, what the Buddhists found, that there is the seventh layer of the consciousness. Don't take it literally. Just try to understand the model of the Buddhist mind. Then they found that, there is another layer of the consciousness, another in the spectrum of consciousness. There is one part which is about, the creation, the experience of self. Now, I am going to speculate a little bit here. Then, there is another layer which the Buddhists call Mula Vidyan. I told you Vidyan, right? We have seen Rupa, Vedana, Satya, Sankara, Vidyan. Right? Now the consciousness, we call it Vidyan, the five Vidyan. And these all senses are interdependent. Only Manovigyan makes them feel like they are, we are having one consciousness. But our eye consciousness is different, our ear consciousness is different, and our all five consciousness are different. But the mind brings all this data together and makes it into what is called the mind in a traditional terms. So, five, then you are six, and the Mula Vidyan, as it's called in Buddhism, is called the Alaya Vidyan. Very difficult concept to understand, but this is the graduation. You can see the progression of the thinking of the Buddhists. From the Buddha onwards to the philosophers, they have gone deep into the mind. And Alaya Vidyan, as the name suggests, it's like, the storehouse consciousness. So, they say that all the, if you look at it from the scientific perspective, as I told you, that our brain has evolved from the billions of years. So, the brain or the deep layer of the consciousness is conditioned by the billions of years of evolution. And the Buddhists have, used a lot of analogous technique to understand, what is the root mind, what is the Alaya Vidyan, what is the storehouse consciousness. So why I am telling you this, and I am going to come to something very practical about our talk today, is, as I told you, you can have a third person's view, that is a scientific view, which, the neuroscience offers. And the neuroscience has gone ahead, understanding the brain and the mental state to a great extent. There are a lot of research papers that you can see today. It has become such a vibrant area. And I told you they can map our mental state on our brain states. That's even possible. They can find the various roots in our brain. So that's one part. And the second part is phenomenology. We can look at our own mental state. And the Buddha has offered us a path, a prayog, by which we can go deep into our own consciousness. We can experience very subtle consciousness. We can experience beyond our, what is called the consciousness that is created by our senses. The Buddha was a very magical teacher. The way he taught, I'm just going to give you the glimpse of his understanding of mind. आपण ज्याला म्हणतो sensory consciousness, Buddha has given this, it's a very beautiful word, kama vachara chitta. Buddha has given a very beautiful word, kama vachara chitta. This kam has nothing to do with the sex or whatever. Kam means indulgence into these sensual objects. Right? So our chitta, and I told you what is chitta. Chitta is something which always holds on to some object. If there is no object, we don't know what kind of a chitta that is. Right? And the Buddha has gone into how we create the experience of me and others. It's very profound. The Buddha has gone into the understanding that how we create this subjectivity and objectivity, atta and loka. How it comes into being. How this very beautiful scientific term. Let me come to that. When the evolution took place, as you know, that we came from unicellular organism, then multicellular, very complex organism that we are. But we came from a very, very, very rudimentary machinery of life. And what happened? Before there was no cell wall, but when the cell wall evolved, the scientist says that since then we had a feeling of what is called the interiority, that I am there and the world out there. And it has gone into such a complex thing that we have always this feeling that I am here and the world out there. So, what the Buddha found very remarkably when he experienced the deeper states of his consciousness, that there is no line separating me and the world. It's all part of the same experience. I don't want to make it very complex. I just wanted to give you a glimpse. It will take hours and hours if we talk about that. So come to the basic level of our consciousness, which we call the kama vachara chitta, the sensory consciousness. The Buddha has discovered many layers of consciousness, as I told you. One of them is what is called the rupa vachara loka. So there is the object to the consciousness, but that is not a physical object. That is nimitta, or what is called the linga or akar. I don't want to go into technical terms. Then there is a third level of consciousness that the Buddha has discovered. They said that they were there before the Buddha, but we get only their detailed description in the Buddhism only, the Buddhist text only. Then there is a arupa vachara chitta. There is no form attached. That is very different consciousness. And then there are different ways the Buddha has experienced his consciousness. I don't want to go into that, but just to give you some words, akasanchayatan means your consciousness is like the sky. It has no center. It's so expandable. Then akinchanayana means it becomes very, very small, very minute. Then there is a consciousness which is not holding to any object, nor neva sanna na sannayata. Even the English is not very easy to express what the way the Buddha has talked about the consciousness, and the consciousness of the Buddha, which we can never talk about, because the Buddha's mind has gone beyond lokuttara chitta. The Buddha's mind is not an ordinary mind. It's a gone beyond mind. It's a lokuttara mind. So now, whenever we talk about Buddhism, as I told you, everything that the science, the third person perspective is offering, and the first person perspective, I think we are at a stage in human history we can have the best of both. We can have the best of both, and we have to cultivate that path that can enable us to find the very experience the deeper level of mind. And a stage comes in the Buddhist practice, as the scripture says, where you can see how everything arises. a stage comes where your mind completely stops. Now, I have not explained the stage, so I cannot say anything about that. But you imagine a state where your brain, your mind is completely halted. It's not running after anything. Just bare awareness. Bare awareness. Just imagine, if you can have that bare awareness, the awareness that is not holding on to anything, just bare awareness. The awareness which is now and here. Not judging, only witnessing awareness. So, before I go further, I would like to give you a very, very interesting example. There was a musician in America, John Cage. I don't know if you have heard of him, very interesting musician. And that musician, he didn't like the harsh sounds. He never liked the harsh sounds. If you are a musician, your mind is so, subtle, so sublime. You want to listen to very subtle, notes. And this man, John Cage, disliked the harsh forms of the music. He didn't like that sound very much. But then he entered into Buddhism. And he started practicing what is called the Jain Buddhism. You can Google his name, very famous musician, John Cage. And what he discovered, if you have a non-judgmental awareness, even you can feel that cacophony as a part of the music. Now this is very interesting. What is happening, I told you, either we are accepting or rejecting, we are liking or disliking. Always our mind or consciousness is in the two modes, liking or disliking, or in the third mode, ignorance. And we know raga, dosa, moha. If we like something, we want it. If we don't want like something, we want to push it away. And if we are not aware, our consciousness is totally ignorant consciousness. So either we are liking or disliking. The latter poets, the Sahajana poets have described this very beautifully. How our mind is always between the two modes of liking and disliking. So he has, just witnessed. He has developed what is called the non-judgmental consciousness. Now, if we do it, if we are sad, what happens? We don't want sadness. But if we imagine a mind trained, that, it just let it be and let it go. You just imagine a mind which is not accepting or rejecting. You just imagine a mind, your mind. It's not accepting or rejecting. It's just bare witness. It is just experiencing what is happening. It is here and now. It's experience your body. It's experience your senses. Just be aware when you are looking at the world. When you are listening to something, just be aware. These small, events of mindfulness add a greater value to us. And when he did it, when he used his non-judgmental awareness to the sounds around him, he found that, you can listen to all the sounds as a music. You are comfortable with all the mental states because you know that they are there. They are there, the anger is there, the sadness is there, or even if there is a depression. But if you bring awareness to that, then what happens? That awareness has such a transformative effect on the consciousness itself that we begin to know how we cannot be governed by these two poles, liking and disliking. And that's very important point. That's very important point that we can cultivate. Now, before we conclude, I'm going to come to something very interesting and very important for, to understand the point of view that Buddha presented. There is a story, very interesting story that, whenever we want to call something, we clap, right? Right? We make sound. Now, when we make sound, if there is our servant, they will come with a clap, right? But if there is a dog, the same sound, what will it do to the dog? If we train him to bring to him, he comes to us, then he will come to us. But now imagine there is a flock of birds. If we clap, he will fly away. The same thing. The same thing. Now I am speaking, but everybody has a different experience. Everybody is seeing me differently. Even depending on where they are sitting, or what kind of a mental state they are, or what kind of the what happened in the last night, right? So we can imagine that this science that the Buddha has offered to us is so precious. For that, we don't have to become, a neuroscientist. They are there doing beautiful experiments. Some of the scholars are saying that there is a lot for the neuroscientists to learn from Buddhism than the other way around. And they are all, topmost scientists. So, what we are doing about it? If we have Buddhism, there is a great philosopher Nagarjuna who says that if we don't practice Buddhism, it's like wasting your life using the golden pot to spit. Our body, our existence is like the golden bowl, and we are not using it. We are using it for the other things which are not important. We are using, as Nagarjuna says, like spitting, omitting on it. So the lesson that we can take it from here, that we, as I have been telling you, that we have the access to the greatest of the wealth that the humanity has produced since in enlightenment of the Buddha. There are thousands of people who have experienced these various states of mind. They have gone and even experienced the liberation. The Buddha was the greatest. I tell you, I often say that if you talk about the greatest philosophy, you will find it in Buddhism. If you talk about the greatest psychology, just to give you a glimpse, people talk about Freud. They talk about his two things, eros and thanatos, whatever. You look at the way Buddha has developed the model of the mind, raga, dosa, and he has added third to that, moha, not seeing as it is because of our lack of awareness. So we are a community which has been endowed, which has been given directly this access to this treasury by which we can go into the deeper experiences that we can ever imagine. There are in the Buddhist texts, they have defined the various states of mind and how you feel when you feel those mental states, when you experience those mental states. The descriptions are so, your body, your hair stand, you feel like whatever. You don't have to fall into that. But what you have to understand is this, that each one of us, whoever we are, have access to the deeper layers of the mind, provided we practice what the Buddha taught. And all these Sila Samadhi Pratnya, but there is one neuroscientist who has shown how the brain, becomes restless if you practice Prajna, Sila and Prajna, regulation, learning. Because the brain is about regulation. There are only two things that neurons do, exhibit or inhibit. Do it or do not do it. Right? So, this neuroscience is affirming whatever the Buddha has taught. It's not, the science, particularly neuroscience and Buddhism, they are not in conflict. They are not in conflict. And our brain is stressless when you have this regulation. And Shila is all about regulating your behavior. Learning, how you learn something. And the brain keeps the memory of everything. That's what they say. Our body keeps the score of everything. And that is what the Mula Vijnana or the Alay Vijnana is all about. It keeps the scores of everything. That's why they say that, even a small act of ours can have the impression on our mind. Even a small moments of awareness. The Buddha says somewhere that if you have a metta-ful thought even for a second, it can wipe out your billions of years of karma. So you think about it. It's not easy. If you look at the compassion, if you look at all the time we are thinking about ourselves. But the moment you mirror somebody, metta is mirroring somebody. The word is itself like mirroring. Me atta. As I am Sodhya, Baba Ambedkar put it very nicely. When I told you how these two, the teachings of the Buddha, compassion and gratitude, they can have a profound impact on our well-being. Now coming back to our society, even if we cultivate these two, teachings of the Buddha, compassion and gratitude. If we can start feeling gratitude towards other people, and the opposite of gratitude, people say complaining. We are always complaining. Our life is all about complaining. This is not good, that is not good, this is bad, that is good, that's the organization. So always complaining. So to end today, and I'm sorry, I just wanted to show you, you don't have to understand everything. I just want to show you that how Buddhism is relevant. How Buddhism is totally relevant to our total well-being. If we want well-being, we have to practice what the Buddha has taught. And the Buddha, as I told you, claimed, he is somebody who claims, he makes a claim. He says that if you practice it, you will find the benefit now, here itself. If you listen to Dhamma with your open mind, you will benefit now, here and now. If you cultivate that bare awareness, not get swayed by liking and disliking, not get swayed, it's difficult, but we can start cultivating that bare awareness. Just become aware as, as I was saying, aware of your touch of your feet to the floor. Just bring awareness to your, the contact of your cloth on your body. Just be aware when you are looking at something. These small events of awareness which we can cultivate throughout the day. And if you can, I recommend very well. You see for meditation 20-30 minutes. It's not much. There is a standard meditation. You just sit like the Buddha for 20 minutes, do nothing. Very difficult not to do anything. So just settle, be aware of your mind, be aware of your body, be aware of your posture. I think Buddhism is very simple. It's the simplest way of experiencing the deeper state of mind, but it's very difficult. So I think the takeaway from today's deliberation would be this, that the third person view, the scientific view, is not in conflict with Buddhism. The way the scientists are studying the consciousness, the various brain states, the constructive and the destructive mental states, they are the categories. The Buddha has already categorized the human mind. He has given the list of the negative mental states. If you are interested, I can direct you to some of very profound Buddhist scriptures that tells us how the total mind is balanced. And before we end, just Buddha has said that there are some boundless mental states, and we can all cultivate boundless mental states. They have no borders. Metta. To cultivate metta, your mental state is boundless. Compassion, boundless. Upekha, mudita, boundless. Upekha, boundless. These are boundless mental states. They cannot be contained. There is no border with that. So, I'm sorry to make this subject a little bit complex, but you can see, you can even glimpse a little bit of how is the Dhamma. How it can give us the experiences which we can never imagine in the normal way of life. If we dedicate ourselves to cultivation of awareness, to the cultivation of regulating our behavior to Shila, to practice, like Buddha says, Vitarka Vichar. So whenever we cultivate our meditation, our mind is going here and there. So mind is going here and there. Even if Buddha says that there is a method by which you can bring your mind back to your object of meditation, and breathing is the object of your meditation. So you can always bring your mind back to your body, back to your senses, back to your breathing, and if you do it, regularly, it will have a profound effect. We can all experience the mental state that the Buddha has talked about and delineated by the Buddha. So thank you so much, Jai Hind, and now interestingly, I read a very interesting note from the Baba. It says that if we are thinking, we can thinking goes because there is a crisis. And as we have seen, when there is a dukkha, then you will think, right? When our life is going on steadily, we are not worried about dukkha, right? We are not worried about doctor. If there is some problem, we think, who is the doctor? Right? So if you have identified that your subconscious behavior or habits create a lot of sorrow for you, I think that acknowledgement is a great state. You understand, even feel that I have a problem. It's a great step ahead. And then there are the factors. The fundamental issues are very fundamental. You regulate your body, mind, and sleep. You experience anything in your experience. everything is changing, arises and passes away. We have seen that in the previous Upajitva Niruddha. Right? So we can bring our awareness to the reality of nature. Right? If you feel that these things are not going to last, either it will have a lot of fear, right? We should look at the mind too. There is one time. Right? So habits are very difficult to deal with. Very difficult to deal with. Some of the habits are very, very difficult to deal with. As I told you, our brain is an outcome of the millions of years of evolution. Right? It is not created by some God. It is not created by any God. It has evolved. Right? So because it has evolved, it has these accumulations of many years. They call in neuroscience neuroaxis. So you can see your brain from you have a spinal cord, then you have what is called a brain stem, and then you have this this amygdala, whatever people talk about. Then they talk about the cortex. Sir has gone into that in one of his lectures. So you can look at our brain. It has got reptile complex. So we have the brain of a squirrel as well, right? We have got the pre-paleo mammalian brain, and we got this modern brain that reflects back on itself. Neocortex reflects back on ourselves. So what I'm saying is, there is a lot of conditioning, and not just the evolutionary conditioning, but there is also cultural conditioning, right? There is also linguistic conditioning, the language we speak. There is also, social conditioning, and we know examples of a lot of conditioning. So to decondition the mind, conditioning his mind is not easy, right? But if we follow the path seriously, as we have seen how we are going to follow the path, Sangam Sarnam Gacchami, Dhammam Sarnam Gacchami, and Buddham Sarnam Gacchami. Supatipanno Bhagavato, Savak Sango, Ujupatipanno Bhagavato, looking as it is, straight looking. Nyayapatipanno, according to Paticca Samutpad, the way the world, the reality is. If we follow this path, if we study the Buddha's Dhamma, because it's very well explained, you engage yourself with the Buddha Dhamma, you study the Buddha Dhamma, we have seen how important it is to study the Buddha Dhamma, not just meditate. That's one aspect of Buddhism, but studying the Buddha Dhamma. So, to answer your question, if we follow the path shown by the Buddha, attested by Baba Ambedkar, he says spiritual joy. Baba Ambedkar's life was the most difficult, but he says that, I have this tremendous spiritual joy. So, it depends on what you want to seek, sir. You want to seek the carnal pleasure, or you want to seek the deeper layers of the mind, by way the deeper layers of the joy and happiness. Right? So it's difficult, but follow the path. Have a commitment to Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha. Follow the path. I think that's the path assured by our forefathers. If you walk on this path long enough, we know for ourselves what to do.